The sea was quiet that morning. Not still, but calm. Like it, too, had taken a deep breath. The traveler sat cross-legged on the wooden deck of his small boat, gaze cast out toward the pale line where sky met water. For once, there was no rush to bail water, fix the boat, or fight the storm. His thoughts had been running ahead again, looping in quiet spirals. What's next? What's wrong? What needs to be done? And then something whispered from within. Feel your feet. He wiggled his toes, pressing them into the warmth of the planks beneath. He noticed how the wood flexed ever so slightly with the water's rhythm. Orient, the whisper came again. Slowly he turned his head, right, then left. The sea, the clouds, the flicker of sunlight, here, now. A memory rose, unbidden. Being on a quiet shore, younger, watching ripples dance in a tide pool. No striving, no storm, just being. And with that, something softened. Something inside said, "You're in a vessel, yes, but not just this boat." He placed a hand on his chest. This one too. This body. The traveler didn't need to go anywhere in that moment. Just here. Just this. Ground. Orientate. Resource. This is So What Who Cares with Laura McCarville and me, Jeff Kolaski. Join us as we explore practical insights for an impractical mind. We have a body.
That's right.
But we are not a body.
Right.
Unpack that for me.
So we have a body. Yeah, let's do it.
That. I'm going to help you unpack that.
Good.
I don't know how, but I'm going to help.
Well, so we have a body, but we're not a body. Here's my example. My dad lost his finger in a boating accident. So now he has 9 fingers. And when he lost his finger, you can imagine I didn't call my sister and say like, well, who's that guy now?
I don't recognize this guy without his finger.
Or when he comes over, I'm not like, glad you're here. Would have been nice if all of you showed up.
Right.
Right? I'm not because he's not his finger.
Right.
Right. And so a lot of times we start to identify with the sensations or experiences we have while in a body.
Mm-hmm.
And so a big part of the work I do, and I've been working with the body for, over 20 years in some form, as a yoga teacher, somatics, movement for trauma recovery in some form. And still it has to be said that the essence of who you are is not the same as the body. The body is, it's just an interesting way in which we approach the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the thing that animates us. And we're always discovering like the fascia, we're in a constant, like, what's this?
Mm-hmm.
So we have a body, but we're not a body. And yet we experience our nervous system in the body, through the body. Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's where, my brain's going when you talk about that. I go to like sci-fi, for example. If I could download my consciousness into a machine, am I still Jeff? How would you respond to that?
Oh, that's really good, given that we're in everyone's in a lot of AI conversations right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you could download your consciousness.
Yeah, or like my brain. Let's just say somehow we figured out how to put my brain into a machine. My body got destroyed and does it matter what my vessel is? Am I still Jeff?
I mean, that's such a great philosophical question because technically you're not in the same body you were even a little bit ago.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And you're not in the same body you were when you were born.
Right.
So,
And when you say that, you're are you alluding to both the fact that it's changed
mhm.
through growth and through time and through weathering and things like that, but also um, the movement of molecules and whatnot?
Yeah, the
Yeah, like
sloughing of skin,
right. Yeah,
just the whole
sure.
nature of the body. And it would probably benefit us to look at it more like our body is nature,
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
more like a tree, um, than like a robot or some
Right.
kind of, but yeah, I guess so. I
Hmm.
guess that's an interesting way of wondering.
We've had so many conversations about nervous system and um, how much of a part of like our body that is, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, it's connected to our brain. Of course, we're all connected and all of that. But I feel the tingling in my hands, or I feel
Mhm.
the whatever in my gut, or I need to wiggle my toes or whatever it may be. Why do you think the body, or what's your take on the body being such a big part of our healing and our and being present and whatnot versus you know it's not just in our brain, it's also in our body.
Mhm.
It's a
Okay.
combination of.
So if we think of like some of the things you just kind of shared, those were all calls to the present moment. So if we think
Hmm.
of the mind able to go into the past, like three rooms, the mind can go into the past and it can go into the future, or it can be in the present. And the body is a way in which we can call ourselves to the present. And in
Right.
that present moment, unless we're in an acute survival moment, like an actual survival, then the body's going to do what it needs to do. We'll go into
Hmm.
survival. But if we're in this imaginary future or ruminating on the past, we're not in the present moment. And so when we can wiggle our toes, it can draw us to this moment. And in this moment, there's no threat.
It's interesting to think about the fact that if our brain can be in three rooms, our body can only be in one,
Yeah.
right? I don't know
Mhm.
why, for some reason that
I mean, that's exactly right.
yeah.
That's why the body does work um, as such a beautiful tool, experience, place in which we get to navigate our life, like to
Mm,
this moment.
yeah. Someone's in a body,
Hmm.
whether it's me or you or someone listening, that's always felt like maybe like a battlefield, or a
Hmm.
they're always fighting against it, whether that's for health reasons or for
Hmm.
nervous system stuff. Um, how do you start to shift that?
Mm. Yeah, that's such a. I have a teacher in yoga, Matthew Sanford, who is a quadriplegic, and he was in an accident that left him paralyzed chest down. And I was in one of his trainings, and he shares the story of when he started to go to yoga. That's when he started to go to yoga. So he was in yoga, manipulating his body into shape. And afterwards, a woman walked up to him and said, "Oh, are you in yoga so you can learn to walk again?"
Mm,
And he said, "No, I'm in yoga so I can learn to be in my body now,
mhm.
how to be in this body
Right.
now." And when we've experienced chronic stress, trauma, and those nervous systems get stuck on, and our um, brain gets stuck in a time loop, then of
Mhm.
course we're going to have body responses.
Right.
And then it becomes, well, how do I work through a compassionate lens,
Mhm.
um, using sort of, I don't want to jump too far ahead
Yeah.
or go too deep, but leaving a doorway open for possibility.
So then would you say there's such a thing as becoming like a friend with your own body? Or is that too weird?
It's not weird at all, but befriending your body is a big piece of it. I About 5 years ago, I taught a series, and it was called, let me think how I said it. I might have to come back to it, but it was in alignment with that, with your body as a place of resurrection.
Mm.
I think maybe I said something like that.
Mhm.
Um, in the way of like, it's where we come and we greet it and we meet it and we make peace with it, with what's happening now.
Hmm.
Not in a way of like what I wish I had and
Sure.
what could be, but like what's happening now and how can I be with it? And if that could be a cranky knee, I came to yoga because of a back injury,
Right.
right? So it was movement. And then it took me, by being in my body, it took me down a path into understanding this like whole experience
Yeah.
of humaning,
Yeah.
you know?
Humanism.
Yes. How can I be a
How
human?
can I do humans
Yes.
stuff?
I mean, that's what we're talking about,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Is the body just physical?
Mm.
Are you talking about something else here too?
Ooh, okay. I wasn't going to talk, I wasn't going to share this, but that's a good question because I'm going to go back to Matthew Sanford,
Okay.
who tells another story that he was going into lotus pose and again, paralyzed chest down, and his femur broke.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Now, excruciating pain. He went and had excruciating pain.
Mm-hmm.
Went to the hospital and they were like, no, you don't. You're paralyzed from the chest down.
Oh my God.
You shouldn't have any pain. So no pain meds. And he said, then what happened? I have full body chills.
Mm-hmm.
They reset his femur and he felt like what he would describe as like his energy body went, and he could feel. And the pain was gone. I know.
What?
I know.
I mean, on such a different level. I mean, what first came to my mind is like phantom limb when you have an itch on something. Some of that makes a little bit sense depending on what your nerves did when you amputated your arm or something like that, and some of it's the memory of, I know what it felt like to have an itch on my hand and now I don't have a hand, but I still know,
Yeah,
my
my
brain's doing
dad's
things.
pinky finger would
Yeah.
itch. We had to do this mirror thing.
Yeah.
That
So
is
that,
kind of trick his brain into thinking
yes.
he still had it. Yeah.
Yeah. So are you, or was Matt,
Yeah, Matthew, yeah.
Matthew, was he saying when they said you actually don't have pain, what did he speak to, like what that does to you as a person? Like,
He didn't speak to that part.
okay.
I mean, I think a lot of us, we all assume like, whoa,
Yeah.
medicine got that wrong.
Right.
Right. And it is something that's impossible to explain to someone who's studying anatomy you can
Right.
touch, unlike the energetics of
Right.
anatomy. Now, if we went to Chinese medicine, if I brought my acupuncturist in the room, she would easily speak to that because it's studied in her theory and her,
Right.
so she would know what that is. And you treat with needles in the physical body, the energetic body. So the lens we look through really does matter. Right. And where he was
really
getting
interesting.
treatment really did matter in the way of response. And it's also wild that he would be experiencing excruciating pain,
Right.
while simultaneously being paralyzed.
So as someone who's gone through a broken bone and I'm not paralyzed, the pain did not go away when that bone was set. So it's interesting to me that how much of that is in your, however you want, brain, nervous system, or energy, that once it was set, pain was gone.
For him.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Like, so it's not just physical then.
Right.
There's something else going on there too.
Yeah.
We don't have to go any deeper into that.
But we will in a future episode.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So what made you start paying attention to the body in this way? You alluded to a back injury. Was there a moment when it kind of clicked to you how this whole thing, like, and being your interest, because a lot of what you do is about the body. When I walked in here, you said, I've been studying the body for years and I still don't know exactly how to talk about it because it's so complex. What kind of got you into this? And
well, and it's complex, but it's complex because of culture and how culture waves with it. So I'm so grateful to have had the amount of years I have had, because at one point I probably would have said yoga can save everyone. And I know better now.
Mhm.
So it's complex because of how people are grabbing on to, data and then making it everything.
Mhm.
Um, for me, the body, I would say I was really disconnected from my body
Mhm.
until I was assaulted by a high school student. I was teaching in a special education teacher. I was assaulted by a student, which left me with a back injury.
Mhm.
And that back injury is what took me into yoga
Mhm.
and started this process of healing. What was interesting about it to me, when my discs were all back, everything was like healed on the,
Mhm.
oh, here, look at these things. And there's no herniated disc and
Yeah.
everything's better. But I still had back pain for a couple reasons, right?
Sounds
One,
familiar. Sounds like Matthew's story in a way.
okay, so what's different with Matthew, I would say, is I had developed like a neural highway to that pain
Pain,
point.
chronic
So,
pain,
right.
right?
So now we're talking about chronic pain.
Right.
And so that neural highway still, my back is, but I still have a trigger point. If I start to get stressed or
Mm.
if something starts to come up, I can locate that pretty quick. I can locate it right now
Mhm.
because my brain has created this like super highway to that spot.
Right.
And then I had to do a lot of rewiring around like dual sensation and
Mhm.
letting my brain move into other sensations besides pain. Um,
Hmm.
and that again is a whole nother thing. I think that's different than Matthew. I think Matthew was speaking more to the
Okay.
energetic body.
Yeah. It just reminded me of that because you say, I look at the x-rays, I hear the professionals talking, and I
Oh
see
yeah.
it's good, but I still feel that.
Okay, so
So,
in that way, that was
yeah.
similar of like
Mhm.
everyone around me saying, "You're better." And I was like, I don't feel
I don't
better.
think I am. Yeah.
Right. No, there was a couple other things that we're still walking through that healing process, because things do happen to our body
Mhm.
as we're growing up. And I had experiences, where I survived, childhood and adult sexual trauma. So I
Mhm.
had a lot of like experiences in this body.
Mhm.
And so in some ways, what that accident did was kind of brought me back into the body.
Mm.
Um, it, you know, because then I had to start to go, oh man, I don't know if I've even been in this thing, you know?
That's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not that there's, I mean, of course you can find silver linings in a lot of awful things. So there, I'm not saying that it was a good thing that you had that assault,
No, no, no.
but
I
at
know.
the same time, and not but, you, something was triggered that said, okay, I need to focus more on being here and seeing what it's like to be in this body, and how does all this work together, and all of that. So,
Right.
you know, that's a positive thing that came out of something pretty awful.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess we could say it was an invitation. Is
Yeah,
how I look
yeah,
at it, more than quantifying positives or negatives
yeah,
around it. But
yeah.
I look at it more like it was an invitation, and I didn't have to accept, and that would have been okay if I
Mhm.
didn't. But for me, it was like, oh wow, I can really. There's something happening,
Right.
especially because now I have chills again
Mm.
because of the yoga.
Mhm.
And this is probably why I was like, oh, because what happens in asana practices and movement, when there's some cueing, you can be cued into your body,
Mm.
versus let's say I'm, free willy nilly weightlifting. I'm not
Mhm.
even paying attention to what I'm feeling
Right.
unless someone says like now elbow and I'm like, oh, elbow, right?
Mhm.
Which happens a lot in yoga. The
Yeah.
cueing takes you into the present moment,
Right.
takes you into the body
Hmm.
again. And so in that way, it was all on the path to being like, here we are.
What is it? Can you explain what it means to track sensation?
Yeah. So when we're tracking sensation, and that does go with when I was speaking to yoga, what yoga is doing is saying like, ankle or knee, maybe they're queuing up some muscles and stuff. Tracking sensation is more like, what does it feel like? And I'll move to the extras, like the outside. What does it feel out here? So not interoception, but exteroception, like what's on the outside. And we always want to start there. We want to start with what we're tracking outside. So if you just take your hand to the couch or the chair and you can feel it, right? And you might say like soft, hard, furry. You might have some words. There's no content, real low risk to do that. And that's where we start with tracking sensation. And that's why I wiggle the toes, right? Because we go, oh, I have toes, I have feet. Now I'm in the present moment. So we start with tracking sensation like this. We want to move from the outside, the peripheral then, because most of our traumatic chronic stress experiences of the body happen through the midline, gut, right?
Yeah.
Heartburn, low back pain.
God dang it.
I know. So we track, we learn to track sensation from outside to in, from like the far away parts to in. Eventually we can move into tracking sensation. And like mindfulness does do a lot of like sensation tracking. Sometimes that can be very overwhelming. That's why I'm sharing this parts of it.
Right.
All of it's to get us into the present moment. And that's very different than like somatic dialoguing and tracking.
Right. That was going to be my next question, actually. What's the difference between just noticing how your body feels and somatic work?
Yeah. And
do you want to go into that world?
Yeah, it's kind of like sama, same in that way. So somatic, again, it's like through the body. In somatic, like dialoguing and tracking, if I were to say to you, like if you said to me, oh man, I had a real crappy day, and I'd say, oh, well, where are you sensing that in your body? Your frustration. And you might be like, oh, right here, I can really feel it, right? That's more along the lines of like somatic dialoguing, or tracking sensation of like, and really befriending where you're sensing stuff. That's not one available to anyone straight off the gate. Maybe that may not be it.
Right.
So we go back to tracking sensation with mindfulness. Again, what we're doing is calling ourselves to the present moment.
Yeah. What happens in the body when someone's been dealing with long-term stress, trauma, things like that? What happens in the body?
Oh man, there's so much really serious research around chronic stress alone. But if we look at The Body Keeps the Score is a book that came out with Bessel van der Kolk some time ago. And I'm not recommending everyone go out and get it and read it. I think it really requires, I say that to everyone, like, please read this in tiny bits at a time if you're choosing to read it. And it may not be something that needs to be going into, because it's really big. But there's a study done with adverse childhood experiences where he really does track what happens in the way of cancers, diseases, illnesses around adverse childhood experiences and chronic stress. So we see how the body keeps the score, meaning we see what will manifest in the body from those experiences.
Right. So the things that we, whether or not it's true or not, I can't obviously speak to this, but, the old adage, like, oh, my kids are giving me gray hair, or, like things, like, don't stress me out, I'm going to get another ulcer, or.
But those are really true things.
So, yeah. And that's.
People's hair color does change during like a traumatic event happens,
right.
And their hair color will change.
Yeah. See, that's interesting to me. Like you can take this system and put it into overdrive for whatever reason, and there are physical things that happen because of it.
Yeah.
Early on in our show, not today, but before, you mentioned that in some cultures, the mind and the body are not two separate things. They're considered one, or the nervous system and the, I don't remember how you worded it.
I said it that way, like the mind, body, heart is not just.
which to me, that makes so much sense. You know, if we're actually having physical reactions to emotional things, um, yeah, that's kind of huge. That's kind of profound in a way. If you've never, like myself, have never really thought about that.
Well, if we look towards poverty, I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's an asthma, the relationship between poverty and
Mm-hmm.
asthma, poverty, trauma and asthma,
Mm-hmm.
um, the way again, that would be and I want to spend time going into that more because
Mm-hmm.
the systems, oppressive systems do create these things. So a lot of times in our culture, we have a narrative of like, you know, like manifest it,
Yeah.
and it's like, yeah. And it's more complex than that.
To use your words, a lot of it comes from the water we swim in.
That's right.
Right.
Yes.
Um, so if something that's stressful that we're dealing with, I'm not talking about like chronic stress, something that's been happening for forever and
Mm-hmm.
there's no end in sight kind of thing. I know
Right.
that's defeatist, but you know,
Sure.
we're dealing with something stressful.
Mm-hmm.
It ends, the tiger goes away.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike the zebra who just goes right back to eating the grass, our brain doesn't get that memo.
That's right.
What's that all about? Why doesn't it?
Yeah. So, how do we work with the body in the way in which the mind doesn't get the memo that
Mhm.
the job got done? You survived,
Yeah.
right? So, in the wild, we'd see like animals shake.
Mhm.
And then, right, there's a lot of shaking done in somatic practices.
Mm.
And yes, and right. So
Mhm.
if someone's promising you if shaking for 5 minutes is going to cure your trauma, that's not necessarily how it
Yeah.
goes. And it's not a bad idea to do some shaking and
Right.
mobilizing it through us, right? So you can
Mhm.
mobilize those experiences and move it through the body.
Mhm.
And we have to tend to where the message didn't get received in the mind, subconscious or conscious mind, that you survived.
So so then at that point, it might be a good idea to use your conscious mind to start trying to work into getting your subconscious to
Mm.
understand that. Is that?
Yeah, and this, wellness, healing, this thing of the human experience, it's all relational. So relational meaning I'm in relation to my body.
Mhm.
There's a relationship here. There's a relationship of mind to body, and there's a relationship between you and me. And so a lot of times people say, "Oh, I've got this low back pain or this chronic, neck pain."
Mhm.
Okay, well, I'll just do more exercises. I'll meditate by myself. Oh, it's trauma. And it's a lot of like,
I got
I
this. I'll
got
do
this.
this. Yeah.
I'll watch a reel,
Mhm.
you know? And in fact, what we need is connection. And
Mm.
that doesn't even mean like, traditional therapy. It really means like community,
Mhm.
support, and connection.
Right.
And in that way, we can start working with the conscious and subconscious mind.
Mm. Can the body hold on to things that we're not even aware of?
Oh yeah, that's its like jam.
Yeah.
Like it can hold on. Yeah, our body holds things and we're like, I don't know why.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think of like conversations I've had with people I love about um, not understanding why I'm feeling a certain way or you mentioned where in your body do you feel that? I don't know. I
Okay.
can't answer that. I can't, and what am I holding on to and why and all of that. So,
Okay, I think that's really important to mention because sometimes people get hyper tuned to the body because of the experiences that they've had. And sometimes people dissociate, like check out, So
mhm,
my experience was like I wasn't really inhabiting a body, right? So if
mhm.
someone had said, "Where do you feel it, sense it?" I don't like,
Don't know how to answer
yeah,
that.
right.
Yeah.
It's not available to me.
Mm.
So it does take the peripheral coming in and growing our awareness to sensation.
Why can some people not feel their body?
Like, why is that?
Yeah.
Well, that shutdown, when we talked about nervous system, if you move into activated freeze,
Mm.
it looks like activated freeze looks like you're going, but you're still frozen,
Mm.
right? And it makes sense. If you're experiencing something acute in trauma, to check out, to survive makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
Um, I don't really subscribe to this whole idea that you need to go back in time and feel it. That's said a lot to sexual assault survivors. Like, you need to go back and you need to fully feel it because you weren't present. So you need to go back and fully feel it. And nah, fuck
That
off.
that made, and thank you for saying that, because that made my stomach turn. And I
Right?
feel like if that had been, you know, I I'm going to be as open-minded as possible and stuff, but for me, I consider, if you I better be careful and I might cut this out, but if you were able to check out in a way during that, good for you. That's your body
Right.
taking care of you.
Mm-hmm.
So why go and reopen that again? Yeah, maybe you got to talk about some things so you can work through it and move on and have an enriched life at the same, as you move forward. Because none of that was your fault, but now it's my responsibility to take my life forward.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think I would never want. I don't like the thought that.
You
But
have to go.
let's go back and relive that. This will be
Yeah.
fun.
So in some therapeutic settings, some somatic settings, that is like cry more. You need to go back and do the thing. So somewhere between no
Hmm.
and not avoiding, like, what were the consequential messages in that moment, and
Hmm.
how do I befriend the body, and
Right.
how do I reckon what happened then with where I'm at now. A
Right.
really powerful thing to consider is if you've had um trauma that you checked out. One thing that was very helpful in my recovery around that is when I was told, you know, that you're not in that body anymore.
Hmm.
He never touched that body.
Hmm.
And that was something that no one had ever said to me.
Wow.
That was the first time I'd heard that in rapid resolution therapy. That I thought, yeah, that felt nice. Like,
Yeah.
I could just like be in my body.
Yeah. This is not a quote unquote tainted body that was hurt or damaged by somebody
You're not
else.
even, and
It's
he
not even
said,
the
like, it's
same
not even the
body.
same body. And he never got to your essence,
Yeah.
never touched who you are,
Yeah.
never got even as close as the conversation
Mm.
you and I are having now.
Right.
So when we consider that,
Hmm.
those are ways in which we befriend the body.
Right. And deal with an awful thing that had happened and not necessarily have to go reopen
Yeah,
wounds. Yeah.
that's right. It's a compassionate
Hmm.
lens
Yeah. I love that.
titrated in. Yeah.
Um, what are some ways that people cope that might actually disconnect them from their body, without maybe them even realizing it?
This is going to sound surprising.
Is it?
Yeah, yoga.
Oh.
I mean, yoga was an invitation for me to get in.
Hmm.
And sometimes we can go so hard and we can work out so hard and we can push so hard and we can get so nearly dissociative, kind of hypnotized by the
Mm.
movement, that we crash out during Shavasana and call it meditation.
Hmm.
Right. So everything has its to be
Balance.
weighed,
Yeah.
like, this is in right relationship, and it can be playful. Like, I'm not saying I
Sure.
don't like to like flow out and do a
Yeah.
vinyasa, but if I'm at the point of like I don't even remember what I was in the class, right?
Right.
So even yoga
Yeah.
can do that.
And I would imagine can go the same way with like more traditional workout routines, whether it's running or lifting
Yeah.
weights or something like that. You get so into that, trying that you almost, I don't know, disconnect from your body.
Yeah, that disconnection's available during anything, even things that seem healthy,
Right.
or labeled as healthy.
Right.
Um,
Hmm.
Again, we can't be present all the time. We
Sure.
can't be in it all the time, and a little here and there. But if our tendency is to like be checked out, get injured a lot while working out,
Mhm.
Like, then we get
Yeah.
curious, like, maybe I'm not even in the body while I'm just flying through these exercises.
Yeah, and sometimes the best part of doing something like a workout or a run or playing the drums or something active or yoga, I'm sure, is to kind of shut all that shit off for a little while
Yeah,
too. So that's not necessarily disconnecting.
in a
It's
bad way,
also,
right? We need to be able to dissociate a little bit,
yeah,
right? Like those
yeah,
are good things to do
yeah,
in small
yeah.
doses, important.
Let me do something active and healthy to
Motor it out.
dissociate a little bit, but not disconnect completely
Right.
necessarily.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I totally
Yeah.
would agree. And you have to like check yourself, like know yourself and
Before you wreck yourself.
know that's right.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
If someone's never done any kind of work or any uh, sort of exercise to help them be more present in their body, what's some place simple that they could start?
Mm. I think butterfly, like this tapping. So if you cross your arms
I'm going to
and
try to do
just,
this without hitting my mic.
yeah, yeah. And just tap, tap. Yeah.
Do I
So
have to
now,
do it in rhythm with
s-
you?
yeah,
Am I-
but watch this. Okay. I'm glad that we just had that
Okay.
experience because this is really cool. Go ahead and just do it yourself. I'm not going to do it. Just feel the tap. Uh-huh. Yeah. Good. And then pause. So one thing we're doing is we're creating rhythm. Rhythm is regulating. And then the other thing is we're inviting sensation. Now, and you're working with your body in relationship to your body. But then there's this other thing that can happen. So let's try and get on the same rhythm. So when we start to do these things with other people, now we're co-regulating, right? Now we're finding a rhythm and we're creating and I wouldn't even say the word co-regulating as much as like we're creating connection,
Yeah,
right? And that
that's
like,
interesting.
yeah, it's really cool to do together. Yeah. That's a great place to
Yeah.
start.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that felt good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like so simple, but like it was
I
kind of
know it's
nice.
like really soothing, right?
Yeah.
Rocking is soothing.
Yeah.
But that is like active, you're present, and because you're catching a beat with another person, if you have the option to do that, then you're even
Yeah.
more present, more active, and we're working on connection.
Hmm.
There's other things too, but that's a simple, juicy, get a lot
Yeah.
out of that one.
Is this kind of thing, this checking in, tracking, noticing, is this something that should be done every day?
I don't like using the word should. And I would say, wouldn't it be something if we were honoring the the full experience of being a human instead of maybe just lifting up the intellect? There's a lot of I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
And what would it be like if it was like, I feel, therefore I am, I sense, therefore I am, I love, therefore I am. So I would never say you should, but we would live in a very different world if we were able to track and dialogue with sensation and our experience of being in a body as, I think Sophie Strand says it, body as a doorway, right? A gateway. If we were living in a body that we could befriend.
Later that day, as the sun lowered itself toward the waves, the traveler stood barefoot at the stern. There'd been no dramatic lesson, no mythical creature or mysterious island, just a slow unfolding. He'd spent the day noticing. The way his shoulders softened when he looked out and saw the curve of the earth. How his breath deepened when he let it. The feel of the oar in his hands, the taste of salt on his lips. He had always trusted the boat, patched together though it was, to carry him. But maybe it was time to trust this other vessel too. The one he was born into. The one that speaks in tingles and tightness, in heat and stillness, the one that senses. There's a kind of safety in coming home to the body, not because it's perfect, but because it's here, and it's his.